Hello, welcome to the Motorsport Review. I'm your host, Perry Brown, and once again recording on my own. Yes, poor scheduling again, keeping me from talking to one of you guys and doing this as a twosome, as a podcast I feel should be. But can I start by saying a huge thank you to I'm just looking at the numbers now, 154 people that watched the Alton Park interviews that me and my daughter did, Amelia. That's huge numbers for like what we normally pull on this podcast. So to think that 154 people sat and watched me and my daughter go to Alton Park and just do this, put a microphone in front of people, chat to people at a race circuit is insane to me. So thank you to everyone that did that, and hopefully we can do more things like that in the future and pull some numbers and maybe even get bigger numbers. So I'm going to do the horrible thing that I hate to do at the start of the podcast, get it out of the way. Please, if you enjoy what it is I'm doing, then please like, share, comment, the rest of the blurb. You can find us pretty much everywhere at the moment on social media. We're trying to put as much of this out as possible, but admittedly, I'm pretty bad at sharing things. Yes, I'm hopelessly employed, so I have to do this in my spare time. So I try and do what I can in the evenings, like record at 10:30 at night, because that's what life is at the moment when you're trying to run a podcast. But we're 2 minutes in and I haven't introduced what I'm doing today. So I, this weekend, spent time watching British GT, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time obviously talking about that, and I might cover some of the big news that came out of F1 last week as well. So British GT, admittedly not a series that I watched before, but that's the point of doing a podcast where I discover new series. So it was on the list, and this weekend we had events like IndyCar at Iowa, had 2 races, but I felt we'd covered IndyCar with the Indy 500 recently, so didn't want to cover that. We had the 6 hours of Interlagos in World Endurance. Again, we covered Le Mans, so I didn't want to cover that. There was Goodwood Festival Speed. Now, I love Goodwood Festival Speed, but it's obviously a bit more of a car show than an actual racing event. Yes, there is the Sunday shootout, and it is phenomenal to watch the cars that go up there. And well done to Roman Dumas, who set the fastest time again in the Ford Super Truck. It was a super van last year, but the super truck now. So they're getting slightly smaller, but the thing looks incredible. But to cover that as an event, having not actually gone, would have been a bit weird. So I sat and watched British GT. And the first thing to obviously mark when we talk about these series is how easy is it to watch? Well, it was on Sky Sports F1. So big tick in the box of being able to watch it. If you watch F1, you've got access to British GT. And if you don't have Sky Sports F1, it's on YouTube for free. So a second, much larger tick. If you want your series to grow and be popular, put it in front of people. It's as simple as that. If you can watch it, then it's going to grow. So big tick for that. As I say, it's not a series I watch too much of. Sometimes it's on, sometimes I flick it on, but I actively sat and watched both the races. Yes, there were 2 races on Sunday. So the cars that take part at the start there, GT racing. So again, when we covered Le Mans, we typically focused on the hypercar battle. A lot of the footage was on the hypercar, the real thoroughbred racing cars. But at the back of the field, sometimes the better racing is the GT cars, and they take center stage here, as you might imagine. So you've got 2 levels of cars, GT3, which are pretty purpose-built race cars. And then you've also got on track at the same time, you've got GT4. So they're closer to the road car spec, if you like. So slightly skinnier wings, less aero, less purpose-built, and more, can we convert a car just to run at the back of the field, just a couple of seconds off the pace of the GT3s. So there's 2 different classes of cars. There's different levels of driver. Now, again, as a newer fan to British GT, I didn't get too much into that, but I kind of know the idea from GT Racing, from World Endurance, that drivers have got different levels. So someone's either a platinum, a gold, silver, or bronze, and to stop them, teams just going out and hiring platinum, gold level drivers, they say we've got to pair you up with amateur drivers. So there's pro am, there's silver class, there's silver am, there's all sorts of different classes depending on the level of the two drivers you've got, which I really enjoyed. I really liked seeing the different setups of the teams, and it did feel at times unfair on the amateur drivers, of the am drivers, because they're not you or me. They're still professional to me. They're still very good at what they do. They're just not quite as quick as their teammate. They're still learning off their more experienced and typically quicker teammate. But what they gave you was quite a dynamic in the team. They've got a quicker driver, so they want to run that driver for as long as possible. So in race one, both races across the Sunday were 1 hour long, and they had to make a mandatory pit stop. There's a set time on that, and they have to swap drivers, crucially. So in race one, earlier in the morning, they started with the AM driver. Get this the right way around. They started with the AM driver. So you've got your, if you like, your slower driver in the car. There's then a pit window, which I think in GT3 was like 22 to 32 minutes, and you have to pit within that time. Now, with your slower driver in the car, they were basically pitting as soon as they could. That was the strategy play. So I'll come to this obviously when I come to race two, which was the opposite way around. But strategy wise, if you're into Formula One for pit strategies and people overcutting, undercutting, maybe British GT isn't for you. There wasn't that much strategy. Everyone pretty much pitted at the same time. Get the AM driver out as quick as possible to get your pro driver. And then, as I say, race two was the opposite way around. Your pro driver started. So it was the opposite. You had to pit between 22 and 32 minutes. You're going to try and go as long as possible, and they had to be out the pit lane. So they were sort of timing it, going, right, 75 seconds to get in and out the pits. We've got to pit with more than 75 seconds to get out with our amateur driver now doing the last stint. So it was nice in that way that, you know, both drivers across the day got to start a race and both drivers got to take the checkered flag. So I really enjoyed that. And yeah, just generally, it was just really good balancing. There's obviously a balance of performance between the cars as well as leveling out the drivers. So pretty much across the day, it led to some really close racing throughout. I really enjoyed it. And there's also, on top of that, if you come in the top 3 positions of a race, you have to serve a longer pit stop for the next race, like a success ballast, if you like, that we used to run in series like British touring cars. So the better you do, the more hampered you are later, again, in an attempt to keep the championship pretty close. So all in all, really good racing. It was at Snetterton. There's 2 races left in the season currently, which I believe are Brands Hatch and Donington, but I can't remember. I was supposed to look that up before I started recording, but it's already 10:30. I had to get going. So if you want to go and watch that. One of the other things we like to discuss is obviously ticket prices. Now, I discussed British touring cars and getting to a British touring cars event and saying it's £48 for the weekend. Well, British GT is even cheaper. It's £38 for a weekend. There's less rounds. There's 7 weekends they race at, but one of those races, one of the previous race to this, was in Belgium, in Spa. So they do an overseas race as well, which is pretty epic. You know, these drivers that sign on to do this, they race at, you know, your Alton Parks, your Donington Parks, your Brands Hatch around the UK, and then they also get to take this series out to Belgium and race around the world famous Spa circuit. So that's, again, just another epic thing that the series does to try and promote itself. So again, all for that. And that race actually runs slightly differently. So rather than have 2 1-hour races, they ran a straight through 3-hour race. So certain events are sprint races, certain races are these more endurance focused, longer races where you're going to see some of that strategy actually play out, where they're starting to think, where can we pit? Again, you don't want to pit too soon. There's a window at the end, I believe, where you had to pit within that. And again, you wanted to pit just on the start of that to make sure that you didn't have to do like a splash and dash at the end, if you like, or a driver swap. So yeah, there was more strategy in that, but I didn't cover that this weekend. We were looking at Snetterton, where the strategy was very much pit right at that moment when you need to. A few tangles, as you might imagine. I don't think there's too many blue flags. So as I say, you've got GT4 cars that bit slower, and they typically got lapped twice through the 1 hour race. And there were different times when the GT4 cars got in the way of the GT3 cars. There were times when the GT3 battles got in the way of GT4. And there was one, I want to say funny, but it wasn't too funny really. A GT3 driver in a close battle came up to a GT4 car that was in its own tight battle. The GT4 car basically said, I'm holding this line. The GT3 car said, you're not. Into the side he went and said, I'll take the line, I'm the bigger car. And off went the GT4 car. And that driver actually of the GT3, he got a penalty for that. And then 3 corners later, he got a penalty again for some overly aggressive driving. So probably a bit hot-headed in that moment. And rightfully so, got some penalties for it. There was a lot of track limits penalties. So again, if you're watching F1 going, I don't like all this track limits. Again, this is going to be the same. It was like semi-automatic systems, pressure pads on the track. If you activated them, you got a penalty. So there was a few drivers throughout the races that got penalties for track limits. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for them. You've got to put a limit to the circuit. It's a slight shame when you're watching someone and then it comes over the voice, the commentary. So it's one thing that actually I didn't mention, the feed that you get on the TV. So you've got the running order, which is really good. The graphics, in terms of as a new fan, looking at which cars where and keeping up with them was brilliant. It was there all the time. I could see very clearly where the battles were, and it showed a good focus on that. Sometimes the Formula One feed, again, it can be focused on, say, how the tyres are when you're going, what are the gaps? So the telemetry you're seeing on the screen on that tower didn't change. It was just constant, and I quite liked that. You also had a direct feed from the race controller. So when he was saying full course yellow in 3, 2, 1, kind of similar to Formula E, when we reviewed Formula E, we said it's really good that you have that direct feed from the race director out to the TV feed. I think it's very important. So that was a really good thing, a really good inclusion on the broadcast, was having that direct feed from the race director, and that direct information coming out from him out to the teams and the drivers. It really enhanced watching this series again, probably especially as a newer fan, not having to rely on the commentator filling in the colour of what you're looking at and filling in what it might mean, but actually getting it direct. So yeah, I can't think of anything else to add at the moment on that, except that I really enjoyed it. As I said, it was something a bit new. It was a quite easy watch, and to have 2 hours of it, but spread out across the day. An hour goes by pretty quickly, especially when you're watching that timer and thinking these guys are going to, the GT3 and the GT4s have different windows, looking when they might start to peel off into the pit lane, who's doing what when, and then the melee of all the cars pretty much entering the pit lane at the same time. It was quite an easy watch, and Snetterton's a great little track. It's had a revamp. It was good to watch racing round there and to see the difference in the cars. Some are streamlined, so you've got McLarens that are like very streamlined up against things like BMWs, which have got more power. So on the straights, especially the back straight at Snetterton, they were able to get past if they'd kept close through the corners. So it was good to see that difference of how you go about racing, how you set your car up to go racing. So yeah, it was really enjoyable. So, as I said at the start, let's talk a little bit about the big news that came out of Formula One, just a little bit. I know this is a review of British GT, but I haven't yet commented on the Horner news. So, Horner, obviously, as I say, he's got the immediate "you are out the door, you're sacked." It was a sacking for Christian Horner, and I don't think anyone was particularly surprised. Now, this kind of news from Red Bull has been coming for a while. You know, they've lost a lot of key staff, and a lot of it seems to have been since all of the drama surrounding Christian Horner at the start of last season. So to think that this has taken a year and a half of watching the team kind of bleed out, as it was, watching their performance drop before finally calling time on Horner's 20-year career. And let's make no bones about it. In those 20 years, he's been very successful. And all the rumours linking him to other teams now are pretty honestly pretty strong, because you can imagine these other teams are looking at Christian Horner, who is now available, who's got these championships, won these championships, is a very valuable figure in terms of getting the performance out of the car. He's now available. So the likes of Ferrari, if they are looking, have probably got to weigh up how they view Fred Vasseur. But the bigger question is why? Obviously, why? So Christian Horner's lost his job, as I say. They've said performance. Now, I feel like we're seeing the tail wagging on the dog, but we're not yet sure why. Is it treats? It's a very weird analogy. But we're seeing the result of something else that's happened in the team. Now, the two leading theories, and they're very strong, and they both relate to Max Verstappen. There's a lot of people saying that now that Horner's gone, that Verstappen's going to stay. That this was him and his management and his dad, perhaps Jos as well is involved in this, perhaps saying to the head of Red Bull, if you want to keep me, then he has to go. It's viable, it's possible, of course. We know, or we think, that all of the scandal that came out last year was potentially leaked. Again, just all rumour from Jos as part of his power play. The other theory, and I'm leading down towards this one, is that Max went and told the team, I have signed a contract elsewhere. We believe Mercedes. That's the leading rumour at the moment. He's signed a Mercedes contract. George Russell seems to have confirmed that talks are going on, and the fact that talks aren't happening with Russell at all would suggest that Toto, Mercedes, anyone there, they've got no doubts that Max Verstappen will be a Mercedes driver next year, perhaps, or maybe George Russell's playing it coy. We just don't know. But I believe that I like to think that he told Red Bull he's leaving. That was seen as the final straw. Look, we've lost Rob Marshall, we've lost Adrian Newey, we've lost Jonathan Wheatley, and now we've lost Max Verstappen. It's just too much. Christian, you're out. Time will tell. It could be, I was talking to someone at work about this, it could be a mixture of the both. It could be that Max leaves, he's got his Mercedes contract, he goes, and Jos actually gets his wish and he stays at Red Bull as well, perhaps. So who knows at the moment. I don't think we'll have to wait long. We've got, coming up in a few weeks, we've got a Spa Grand Prix, and then just after that we've got double header, of course, with Hungary as well, and then we're into the summer break. And I think the summer break is when all of the news is going to filter down. Will George find a seat elsewhere? Undoubtedly. I think he's too good a driver to not be in Formula One right now. So I think, would he go to Red Bull faced with going out of Formula One? Perhaps. Would he look at Aston Martin? Would he say, look, would you take me over Alonso? Is Stroll really still interested in Formula One? But yeah, I think we're not going to have to wait long to find out exactly what's happened, but for certain, something has triggered all of this. Let's not obviously forget about the two people at Racing Bulls that have had promotions. So Lauren Meckies has got his promotion from, if you want to call it promotion, when it's the drivers, we sort of aren't sure, are we? But moving up from Racing Bulls team principal to be Red Bull Racing team principal is Lauren Meckies, and stepping up from within Racing Bulls setup to now be the leader of Racing Bulls is Alan Permains, a name I recognise with the Renault years of their championship. So again, someone who's got success in his locker. So I think both teams are in very good hands in that regards. Again, I love or hate Horner. Again, it's another big name out of Red Bull, and performance hasn't been where it has been this year, and that's what's leading me to believe that Max is looking at this team and going, do you know what, I need to find something elsewhere. I think he's doing a bit of a Vettel. Vettel won 4 championships with Red Bull. The season after that, 2014, wasn't particularly great. Ferrari were interested, and he pretty much leapt straight at that chance, because who apparently would turn down Ferrari? So, the might of Mercedes, who have won so many championships, probably pretty appealing to Max Verstappen in that way. So that's the big news in Formula One at the moment, or was last week. Sorry, I didn't record anything of it. Again, hopelessly employed. So when the news came out, I was at my desk thinking, if I could actually talk about this now, then I would. And as soon as it had passed by the evening, it's old news. So even covering it a week later, I just wanted to have a say. But we'll see very clearly on when that's going to happen. But that was British GT. That was a bit of an update on Formula One. Next week, hopefully back to normal business in terms of having a podcast where it's actually a chat, not just me talking to a phone on a stand. But looking to cover the E1 series. Now, if you don't know what that is, you've got a week or less than a week now to have a look into it, because I'm super excited to be covering it. It's very different to anything we cover normally. Doesn't have wheels, it doesn't have tires. Have a look into that. I'll cover that next week. Hopefully, again, fingers crossed, with a special guest that I've been trying to get on for a little while. Hopefully she'll be joining me to talk about it. She's the one that actually told me about the series, so it's her fault that I'm covering it. So E1 series next week. But for now, thank you very much for watching the Motorsport review. Thank you again, once again, to anyone that watched, of those 154 that watched me and my daughter prat around Alton Park and talk to people and put a microphone on her. Then you're the real ones. So thank you very much. Enjoy. Good night.